At that family dinner, my mom was smiling like everything was picture perfect. My dad was cracking the same jokes he recycles every month, and my sister looked at me with an exaggerated tenderness. "You're the best sister in the world," she said. I laughed. I raised my glass and let out what had been stuck in my throat for weeks. "That's it. I'm sick of all of you." They froze. "What are you talking about?" my dad asked, his smile still half hanging on his face. I looked at them one by one and nodded slowly. "I know what you're planning against me." The color drained from my mom's face. My sister gulped, and my dad stopped playing with his fork. I said that weeks later at another dinner, but to understand how we got there, I have to start at the beginning. My name is Natalie. I'm 33 years old and I work in corporate accounting at a mid-sized firm in a business park. I'm not a millionaire, but I do well enough to rent a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet suburb, pay my bills without falling behind, and have real savings, the kind that don't disappear on impulsive shopping sprees. My life is order. I like things to balance out. I pay on time, I meal prep for the week on Sundays, and I have a budget spreadsheet that I review every Friday. My friends say I'm boring. I don't care. I prefer boring to living with a knot in my stomach caused by debt. My family is the exact opposite. My parents, Linda and Joe, are in their mid-50s and have a special talent for ignoring any sort of plan. My mom worked part-time at a retail store until last year, when one day she decided she couldn't take it anymore and deserved to rest. My dad picks up construction gigs or handyman work when it suits him, which lately is almost never. They live paycheck to paycheck when there is a paycheck. And then there's my younger sister, Emily. She's 28. She works at a coffee shop, but only when she isn't focusing on her art. She paints abstract things that look like finger painting from kindergarten, but she introduces herself as an artist. She's been living for over a year in a tiny, old studio apartment in a pretty sketchy part of town. Even so, she thought it was perfect because she claimed it gave her inspiration. And guess who has been paying that rent? Yes, me. At first, it was an emergency thing. 3 years ago, my parents called me crying because they couldn't cover a major mortgage payment. "Just this one time," they told me. "It's really urgent." I sent them $1,000. Then it happened again the next month, and the month after that, and without realizing it, it became the norm. I ended up setting up a standing transfer of $1,500 every month because, honestly, it was easier than dealing with the drama. With Emily, it was the same. Last year she called me sobbing, saying she was about to be evicted. "Just help me this one time, please," she begged. Her rent was $800 a month, which was more than she made most of the time. I thought if I paid that, she'd at least have a stable roof over her head and could figure things out calmly. I didn't have a problem helping, or so I kept telling myself. So when my mom called me on a Tuesday to invite me to dinner on Friday, I said yes. We try to do a family dinner at least once a month, even though it almost always ends the same way. Me eating whatever my mom made while they complain about their problems as if the world owes them something. On Friday, I arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, as always. My parents' house is in an older suburb, on one of those streets where everything looks a bit tired. They've let it deteriorate because repairs are expensive. The screen door squeaks, the paint is peeling, and the front porch has been sagging for years, like it's about to give up. I walked in and saw Emily on the couch, glued to a guy I had never seen before, tall, skinny, with a 2-day stubble beard. Emily was laughing like he was telling the funniest story in the world. "Natalie," she said, jumping up to hug me, "I have to introduce you to someone very special. This is Mark, my fiancé." I stood there blinking. "You're what?" "We got engaged," she said, showing me her left hand with a tiny ring, featuring a chip of a stone that shined more from hope than anything else. "When did this happen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice sounding normal. "Just recently," Emily said, squeezing closer to him. Mark stood up and shook my hand. "Nice to meet you. Emily talks about you so much. You're the successful sister." No, it wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, like that word came with a price tag. I smiled out of politeness. "Congratulations." We sat down to dinner. My mom brought out the usual: dry roast chicken, mashed potatoes that were a bit gluey, and a salad that seemed more water than lettuce. My dad asked Mark what he did for a living. "I'm in between projects right now," Mark replied, as if it were a very interesting temporary phase. but I've got some big things in the pipeline." Emily looked at him like he had discovered fire. We were halfway through dinner when Emily put down her fork and made that face that meant, "Here comes the important part." "So, I have something to ask everyone." I shifted in my chair internally. Here we go again, I thought. Another crisis, another favor, another just this once. This time, Mark's parents invited us to go spend a week with them in Hawaii, Emily said, her eyes lighting up. "They say they want to get to know me better, that it would be perfect to bond before the wedding." I nodded slowly. "Sounds nice." Emily took a deep breath. "The detail is, the trip comes out to about $12,000 for the four of us." And when she said the four of us, she looked straight at me. My parents did too. Mark too. I put my fork down calmly. "I'm not paying for that trip," I said. Emily pursed her lips. "Natalie, ish. Come on." I looked at her as if I were explaining something obvious. "You can bond with your in-laws without spending that amount. They can come over for dinner, go to a park, go for a walk, do something normal. Bonding isn't something you buy." Emily's face turned sour. Mark leaned forward with an expression of annoyance he didn't bother to hide. "Sorry, but that sounds rude," he said. "Emily and your parents told me you always help them, that you're the one who bails the family out when needed. This is important for our relationship." And there, I understood it. The idea wasn't just Emily's. Mark spoke about the trip as if it were already decided, as if the only missing piece was me paying. My stomach tightened. In other words, they had already discussed this with this guy with a stranger. They told him how I sent money, as if I were an ATM that lights up every month. I stared at Mark and felt a very ugly clarity. He was just like them. Another one coming with his hand out, only with a smile. "I'm not throwing money away on a vacation," I said, watching my tone. "But when you're organizing the actual wedding, then I can help with something that matters." Emily opened her mouth as if to argue. I raised my hand, cutting her off. "This topic is over." The rest of the dinner was pure ice. Emily glared at me every time I looked up. Mark didn't even speak to me. My parents exchanged little glances as if they were evaluating how disappointing I had become. I didn't care anymore. I ate, helped clear the table out of habit, and left. Several weeks passed after that dinner, my phone silent. No texts from my mom asking how I was, nothing from Emily sending me dumb memes, nothing from my dad asking me to stop by and help him with something. My family is dramatic, yes, but they had never given me the silent treatment like this. Even when we fight, someone tries to fix it within a few days. This felt different. One Thursday afternoon, I did something I almost never do. I showed up unannounced with a peace offering. Near my office, there's a really good bakery, the kind that hurts your wallet a little but makes you look good. I bought an apple pie with cinnamon, my mom's favorite. It cost me about $45, but it was one of those desserts that makes people remember it's not worth being angry. I told my boss I had a family matter and needed to leave early. It wasn't a lie. I left early to avoid getting stuck in the afternoon rush hour. Still, I braved the usual slow crawl, the stoplights, the trucks, the city squeezing in. I drove to my parents' house with the pie in hand, mentally rehearsing an apology. Not because I felt I was wrong, but because I was getting tired of the atmosphere. I still had a key to the house from my college days. They never asked for it back, and I never thought I'd someday need to explain it. I entered carefully, and that's when I heard voices in the kitchen, loud voices, the kind that aren't casual conversation. I stopped before calling out, "I'm home," because they hadn't heard me come in. Then I heard Emily clearly. "I really want to go to Hawaii with Mark and his parents, but I don't have the money. Natalie is being so cheap about this." I froze. My mom's voice came next, calm, as if she were talking about what to buy at the supermarket. "Don't worry, your dad and I already figured out how to get the money out of her." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm going to say my arthritis has gotten worse and that I need a special treatment. You know how Natalie is. If you talk to her about doctors, she gets scared and pays up." And they laughed. They laughed like it was a hilarious joke. "How much are you going to ask for?" Emily asked anxiously. $14,000, my mom said. "That covers the trip and leaves us enough to catch up on things around the house." "Awesome," my dad said, jumping into the conversation. "Natalie has always been so naive about those things. She believes everything." I waited. I truly waited for my mom to stop him, to say something like, "Don't say that," to defend me even a little bit. My mom laughed harder. "You know what the truth is? she said, as if confessing a fun secret. When Natalie cooperates, then she's a good daughter. When she doesn't, she just annoys us with her lists, her scolding, and her way of wanting to control everything. I felt like vomiting. The pie felt like I was carrying rocks. I moved toward the door without making a sound. I stepped out and closed it carefully. I took a deep breath, as if the air would help me process what I had just heard. And then I did something that surprised even me. I knocked on the door again as if I had just arrived. "Coming!" my mom yelled with a cheerful voice that disgusted me with its falseness. She opened the door, and her face lit up. "Natalie, what a beautiful surprise. Come in, come in." I walked back into that same house, holding the same pie, looking at the same woman who had just said I was only worth something when I cooperated. "Look who's here," my mom sang toward the kitchen. My dad and Emily came out with huge smiles, the kind that feel pasted on with tape. "Nat," Emily said and ran to hug me as if weeks hadn't passed without speaking to me. "I brought pie," I said, lifting the box. "You're so sweet," my dad said, patting me on the shoulder. "Sit down, let's have coffee." We sat at the kitchen table, in the exact spot where a minute ago they were planning to scam me. My mom poured coffee, cut the pie, and talked nonstop about how beautiful it looked, how thoughtful I was, how much they missed me. I watched them with new eyes. Emily's smile didn't reach her eyes. My dad kept glancing at my mom as if they shared a private joke, and my mom spoke a little higher pitched than normal when she feigned excitement. It made me angry to think that maybe it was always like this and I just didn't want to see it. My mom sat down with her plate and suddenly made a grimace. "Oof, this arthritis is really getting to me," she said, grabbing her wrist and then her lower back. "It's hitting me harder lately." I took a sip of coffee. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah," my mom continued, glancing at me sideways to gauge my reaction. "In the mornings, my hands wake up stiff. I can barely hold a cup, and I'm not even sleeping well anymore. It's constant pain." She flexed her fingers as if demonstrating a tragedy. Emily made a worried sound. My dad sighed as if he were carrying the weight of the world. "That's heavy," I said, without changing my expression. My mom shifted in her chair, dramatizing. "I'm thinking I'm going to have to go to a specialist because the insurance keeps giving me the runaround, and if I want to start fast, it would have to be out-of-pocket private care. You know how the healthcare system is." I nodded, looked at my watch, and put on a serious face. "Shoot, I just remembered I have to go back. A problem came up at work." My mom blinked, confused. "What? But you just got here." "Yeah, sorry," I said, standing up. "Thanks for the coffee. We'll talk later." I kissed my mom on the cheek, hugged Emily and my dad, and left. As I walked to the car, I managed to see them through the window. They stood there as if they didn't understand why their performance hadn't worked. I drove to my apartment on autopilot. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I arrived, double-locked the door, sat on the couch, and finally allowed myself to get truly angry. $2,300 a month. That's what I had been sending them for years between one thing and another. $1,500 to my parents, $800 for Emily's rent. It was insanity. Annually, it was a brutal amount, and they laughed. They called me naive. They said I was only a good daughter when I cooperated. My anger didn't stay as anger. It turned into something colder, clearer. "You want to play?" I thought. "Okay, I know how to play too." For the next few days, I acted like nothing was wrong. When my mom texted asking how I was, I replied normally. When she started inserting the arthritis topic into the messages, I replied with, "That sucks, and hope you feel better soon." But I didn't offer money. Nothing. My mom slowly raised the tone. First, it was general complaints, then symptoms, then alleged doctor visits. One night she wrote, "The doctor says it's getting complicated, and if I don't start treatment now, I could end up permanently disabled." I replied, "That's terrible. Hopefully, you find a good treatment." Minutes later, "It's just that it's so expensive and insurance doesn't cover everything." Me. So frustrating, truly. I could feel the confusion on the other end because normally, by this point, I would already be asking how much they needed and when to deposit it. Instead, I pretended I didn't understand. It went on like this for 3 weeks. My mom became more obvious. She sent me links about treatments, told me about a specialized clinic, invented stories about a friend who improved tremendously, until one Wednesday night she called me. I was on the couch eating a quick dinner and watching a show when the phone rang. "Natalie, honey," my mom said with a serious voice, "we have to talk. Can you come for dinner this weekend? There's something important we need to discuss regarding my health." I smiled to myself. There it was, the moment they had been building since I heard their plan. On Saturday, I arrived on time. Emily and Mark were already there, sitting on the couch with faces of rehearsed concern. My mom walked slowly, as if every step were a feat. My dad offered her help with everything. "Natalie," Emily said, getting up to hug me. "I'm so glad you came. We're really worried about Mom. She's been in pain all the time," Mark added, which seemed ridiculous to me because he barely knew my mom, but he was already fully committed to the theater. We sat down to dinner, and the show began. My dad suddenly became affectionate. "Daughter, truthfully, we are so proud of you," he said, as if he hadn't ignored me for weeks. "You've always been the smart one, the responsible one." Emily joined in quickly. "Seriously, you're the best sister in the world. I don't know what we'd do without you." My mom smiled at me every 2 minutes. "I love you so much, sweetie." Mark jumped in too. "Emily has told me you are very generous. It's inspiring." I ate in silence, waiting for the blow. Finally, it arrived. When my mom cleared the dessert plates, she came back to sit down with a perfectly calculated face of pain. "I didn't want to bring this up during such a nice dinner," she said, "but we have to talk about my health." Everyone went quiet, looking at her with soap opera eyes. "They ran more tests," my mom continued, "and the specialist says I have to start treatment now. He recommended a rehabilitation clinic for severe cases like mine." She took a long pause, almost crying. "The problem is the cost. It comes out to $14,000. Insurance won't resolve it quickly, and if I don't do it soon, the doctor says I could get much worse." Emily covered her mouth with her hand. "Mom, no." Then she looked at me as if she were truly suffering. "I wish I could help, but with what I make at the coffee shop, I can't," she said, and looked at everyone as if waiting for the world to understand how unfair her life was. Mark shook his head. "I would help, but I don't have a steady income right now." My dad sighed, looking at his plate as if he were carrying an immense grief. "We've been looking at how to manage it, daughter, but we don't have that amount." And then, all 4 of them turned to look at me at the same time. There was the spotlight, the moment for which they left me in silence for weeks. I looked at them, my mom with her fake, worried face, my dad with his air of a united family, Emily biting her lip as if she were on the verge of tears, Mark sitting as if he were also part of my history, and I couldn't help it. I laughed. But not a little giggle, a cackle that bent me over, that brought tears to my eyes, that left me breathless. They stared at me as if I had gone crazy. "Natalie," Emily said, hesitating. What's funny?" "This is serious," my dad murmured. I wiped my eyes, took a breath, and looked at them calmly. The plan. The silence fell like a stone. My mom let out a nervous laugh. "Plan? Oh, sweetie, I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you know," I said. "I heard you 3 weeks ago when I came with the pie. I heard you say you were going to fake the arthritis to get $14,000 out of me. That it was for Emily's trip to Hawaii, that you were going to ask me for that amount and keep the extra." Emily turned pale. Mark's mouth dropped open. My dad looked down as if he wanted to disappear. I continued because there was no turning back. "I also heard you say that I'm naive, that I believe everything, that when I cooperate, then I'm a good daughter, and that the rest of the time I'm just a nuisance." The color drained completely from my mom's face. "Natalie, I can explain." "No," I said, standing up. "No need." I looked at them one last time with a calm that surprised me. "That's it. It's over." Emily stood up too, desperate. "Natalie, you can't." "Yes, I can," I replied. I turned and walked toward the door. "The transfers are over. Paying rent is over. Family dinners where I just come to be the cashier are over." "But we're your family!" Emily shrieked, and her voice wasn't sweet anymore, it was rage. "You guys should have thought about that before," I said without raising my voice. "I'm canceling your rent today." My mom started to cry or fake cry. I didn't even know anymore. My dad got up with his hands open, as if trying to fix it with words. "Natalie, wait, don't leave like this." I opened the door. "I left years ago. I just finally realized it today. I walked out and didn't hear the rest. That night, I got to my apartment and sat in front of the computer. I opened my banking app. I canceled the standing transfer to my parents. I canceled the transfer to Emily's landlord. It took me less than 10 minutes to undo 3 years of supporting 3 adults. And although it sounds ugly, it felt incredible. I hadn't even finished when the phone started ringing. My mom, my dad, Emily. One after another after another. I didn't answer any of them. Then the text started. Complaints, guilt, begging. Emily wrote me a massive text saying I was cruel and selfish. My dad sent a short one calling me ungrateful. My mom sent an endless message saying I had understood everything wrong. I deleted them without finishing reading. Around 10 p.m., a call came in from a number I didn't have saved. I answered out of habit. "Natalie!" Emily yelled from the other side. "I'm calling from Mark's phone. You have to listen to me." "No," I said. "I don't have to." "You're selfish," she shrieked. "You can't abandon us like this." "Yes, I can," I replied and hung up. I blocked that number. Then I blocked my mom, my dad, and Emily. If they wanted to tell me something, they could send a letter. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. I got up, went to work, came back, ate dinner, watched shows, and for the first time in years, I didn't have that sensation of waiting for the next emergency. Until they arrived at my building. It was a Tuesday, around 7 p.m., when I heard loud banging on the door. Not normal knocks. It was like they wanted to break it down. "Natalie," Emily yelled from the hallway. "We know you're there. Open up." I looked through the peephole. There were the 3 of them, my mom with a hard face, my dad red with anger, Emily with eyes blazing. "We need to talk," my dad shouted. "Please," said my mom. But it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like a demand. I stayed still. They banged and yelled for several minutes. Surely the neighbors were hearing everything, and I could hear the building security guard moving in the hallway, not knowing whether to intervene or not. I approached the door and spoke loudly, without screaming. "If you don't leave right now, I'm going to ask security to remove you, and I'm going to call 911. Emily let out a laugh. "You wouldn't dare." I took out my cell phone, dialed, and held the phone close to the door so they could hear I was speaking seriously. The banging stopped abruptly. I heard them arguing quietly, angry, and then they left. After that, they left me alone. Months passed. At first, I expected them to come back or find another way to contact me, but no. Maybe out of pride, maybe because they finally understood I wasn't going to yield. I heard about things through my cousin Lauren, who still spoke to them occasionally. "Your parents are struggling," she told me one day on the phone. "They had to start working full-time. Your dad started picking up more construction work. Your mom got a job at a department store. They're tired, but they're getting by. Emily went to live with Mark at first, but that didn't last either. They fight all the time," Lauren told me. "Mark is annoyed because Emily barely contributes. With what she makes at the coffee shop, she can barely cover herself." I felt a little bit of guilt. I admit it. A tiny dot. But it passed quickly. Emily was 28. It was time. "Do they talk about me?" I asked. Lauren hesitated. "Yes. Your mom says she misses you, but mostly they're angry. They say you abandoned them." I let out a dry laugh. How curious. The truth is, I didn't miss them. I thought it would hurt on birthdays, on holidays, on those dates when one feels more sensitive. But when my birthday arrived in November, it was light, even nice. I didn't have fake calls. I didn't have sweet messages with hidden intentions. I bought myself something I had wanted for a long time. I went to dinner with friends. I felt free. And my savings account started to look like never before. Without those $2,300 a month going out to my family, I was finally able to get ahead on my car payments and start saving for a down payment on a house. It wasn't magic. It was just stopping supporting people who didn't want to support themselves. At work, I got closer to my colleagues. I made new friends. I started dating Ryan, a guy from IT who was calm, intelligent, and above all, didn't see me as a resource. Months later, I took a trip to Italy, something I had always wanted and never allowed myself because family first. This time I could, because I was finally using my money on me. For the first time in my adult life, I was the priority. Near Christmas, Lauren called me again. "Your family is having a rough time," she said. "Your parents work so much they're exhausted. And Emily and Mark broke up last week. What happened? I asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. Mark got fed up, said Lauren. He told her it was time for her to get serious, to find a better job, or stop expecting someone else to support her. Emily moved back into my parents' house. She was back at the start, only now my parents couldn't carry her like before because they could barely carry themselves. They've talked about looking for you, Lauren told me regarding the holidays. I stayed silent for a moment. And what do you think? She asked. I thought about the laughter in the kitchen, about my mom's phrase, about the plan with my name on it as if I were an object. Maybe someday, I said finally, but not until they take responsibility. And not until they apologize to me for real not to look good, but because they mean it. Lauren Seahilled. I understand. We hung up. I sat in my living room with my apartment in silence, no screaming, no pressure, no fear of the next phone call. And that was when I understood it with a clarity that gave me peace. I was fine, I was calm, and for the first time in years, my life was mine.